Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and what I'm about to play for you is an audio clip of a recording that George Ortega and I already did. The conversation is about food, obesity, free will, and even politics. We talked about just about everything in that episode. So it was meant to be for an episode of his White Plains show exploring the illusion of free will. However, it also doubles as an episode for the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast because it's free will related and it's food related, and that fits in well with our main theme of this show. So I'm going to play the audio of that, and you may be able to find video of it later on once it's on George's show. Hey, so George, let's talk about food and how our eating habits show that we don't have a free will. Do you want me to start with examples, or do you want to? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you had a great example.
Yeah, okay, so the idea that somebody freely chooses what they eat or how much they eat of anything means that they would have to choose their own hunger in the first place. So unless they chose to be hungry, at how hungry they were, how can they claim to be responsible for what they eat or how much they eat? So they can't be like morally responsible, credit or blameworthy for eating too much, eating too little, eat whatever it is. I mean, and I think that's a relatable example.
Okay, let's take them one at a time. Let's start with, for example, like what we eat. In other words, like we don't get to decide what our preferences are. Some people have a sweet tooth. They love to eat sweets. Some people love fried fat foods and stuff. Some people dislike certain foods. That's not up to us. Our food preferences, I mean, we're either conditioned with them from a very early age or they're genetic. And so like neither case allows for a freely willed decision in terms of what we eat.
Yeah, we can go with that because we've got the nature or nurture components there. So basically, somebody genetically, from the time they're born, I mean, they already have these preferences. They're gonna like either ketchup or mustard more than another. Everyone knows I like ketchup, but but also, even if they have a tendency to like a certain food, they may not live in a culture where people eat that food. You know, they may not have experienced that food until later in life. Like I just tried kale, recently, and I didn't know what kale was. But it's like, hey, I like it more than other leafy vegetables that I've had. So that's just it. We find out through our lives, we don't decide what foods we like. We simply discover what foods we were genetically programmed to like at the start with.
Exactly. We've got to be very clear about this. We're not saying that, for example, let's say we're eating unhealthy foods. We're drinking too much soda. Like each can of soda has, I think, about 12 teaspoons of sugar and stuff. There's some food that just isn't healthy, whatever. So we're not saying that we can't, cultivate, develop healthier eating habits. We do that all the time. What we're saying, though, is like if we're lucky enough to do that, or not is not really up to us. So we really, we should continue to encourage ourselves and others to eat healthy. But when we fall short of the mark, when we're not able to, fine, we want to still continue to encourage ourselves and each other, but doing it without the blame, doing it like, you of your free will are just like, eating such horrible food and you're a horrible person. That's the horribleness of this free will belief.
Yes, and I can shortly sum up what you just said. Basically, when we do change our dietary habits, that doesn't require a free will. It's a causal process. Something caused us to change. For example, somebody, they have a health concern. Like a very relevant example is recently, my mom was advised by her doctor, to lower sodium intake related to blood pressure and all that sort of thing. So now we're learning about this and we're paying attention to sodium, and now I'm mentally adding that to my list of things I check for. You know, so that's just an example, is when there's a health concern, that's a common example of someone changes their diet, like, oh, well, this isn't good for me, let me find an alternative. So yeah.
Exactly. And for example, if you're like trying to influence someone else to eat healthily, if you adopt this free will perspective and start blaming them and accusing them, that's not going to work nearly as well as if you say to them, listen, I understand this isn't fundamentally up to you, but to the extent that you eat healthier, you're going to be healthier and your life will be better. So like, again, it's a much more compassionate and probably effective way, not just of helping other people, eat healthy, but also to ourselves. We would say the same things to ourselves.
Exactly, because one of the problems is, some people, they may have good knowledge. They may have knowledge about how to eat healthy, but then when they talk to people, they come across as a jerk because they believe in free will, and so they're blaming people. It's like, well, you're choosing to eat unhealthily, and it's like they get all mad at them, and so then those people get all upset, and it's like, well, you know what, I don't like you, so I'm going to eat more of this unhealthy food that you don't like, just to spite you, and that's what happens.
I hear you. All right, so Chandler, we've covered this like preference in foods. It's not really up to us. We don't have a free will to choose what we prefer. But now let's go to the hunger issue. For example, a lot of people are overweight because, they are eating, right? And let's say they're already filled. Their stomach is full, but they continue to be hungry, And so like a lot of people will blame people. Oh, that's gluttonous. You're just like a pig. You're just like eating way too much and stuff. And this stems from the free will belief. So now describe to the audience how it would be as people overcome this belief in free will.
Well, as people overcome this belief in free will, then they become interested in the causes. Well, why is this person hungry? Is there something in their food that's making them more hungry? Is there some genetic component, some condition they have that's adding to their hunger? Do they have a parasite that adds to their hunger? There's all sorts of different things that I've heard of that can cause people to be hungry for more than they need. And it could be that their food isn't enough nutrient dense enough. There's not enough nutrients, and so their body's screaming, "Give me more! I'm looking for vitamins," Oh
yeah, and another point, we want to be very clear to our audience. In other words, what it also could be is that the person is not exercising enough willpower. So in other words, for example, you have two people, and one person really wants to lose weight much more than the other, has much more incentive, is able to summon up more willpower. But, when we say that, we also have to explain that willpower is not the same as free will. Fine, one person may have more willpower to eat less, to not overeat, than the other person, but neither the person who eats less nor the person who is not able to has any amount of free will at all.
Exactly. For one thing, someone doesn't choose their level of willpower. No matter how you may define willpower, you have as little choice in that as you did your own hunger to begin with and your preferences in food.
Right, and again, as with our preference with foods, even though we don't have the fundamental free will to choose our foods, we can, over time, cultivate better, eating habits. So with free will, if we don't have enough free will when we first start trying to diet, we can, read a few books about it, learn about it, just exercise our free will. So we're able to do that. But again, the key thing to remember is, whether we succeed or not in that is fundamentally not up to us.
Yeah. And the knowledge that it's not really up to you to begin with, in a sense, it matters and doesn't matter in some interesting ways, because some people are they just dismiss it, well, why would it matter whether it's up to me or not? And it matters in how we treat people significantly, because when we just blame and credit people as if they were the author of everything they do, then it leads to all sorts of negative feelings and arrogance on the people who just were born with more quote unquote willpower, So that's part of it, but at the other side of it is that the sense in which it doesn't matter is that we still enjoy doing the things that we like, even though those things were not up to us. So it seems to me that it takes away a lot of pain when we remove free will belief, but it leaves the positive elements of our lives untouched. So it's getting the good without the bad.
Chandler, that's great. So you're making 2 points. On the first one, just, we tend to shame and to blame people who are overweight for that, and we do that based on this free will belief. Now, here in the United States, about 2/3 of Americans are overweight, so there's a lot of discrimination and a lot of blaming, a lot of shaming based on people's belief that, oh, this person, is choosing to be overweight, they're just being immoral, they're being kind of evil in a way, or they're deserving of shame, they're deserving of bad treatment. So what we're saying is that to the extent people understand, no, we don't get to fundamentally choose how overweight or slim or whatever we are because we don't have a free will. Fine, we'll still want to encourage ourselves and each other to, eat healthily, to maintain a healthy weight, but we're going to do it with a lot more compassion. The second point that you made is also really good. It's just the idea that wait a minute, I lost my train of thought. What was the second point? You had an excellent point relative to that. Was it that we don't really choose No, you had a point. I'm sorry.
I think I remember what it was. I think it was how overcoming free will belief, it removes a lot of negative, but it leaves the positive intact. And that's what's so brilliant about it.
Excellent. Thanks, Chandler. So, all right. So, yes. So, in other words, we like to take credit. Let's say we are overweight, and let's say we're 30 pounds overweight. We decide to diet. We summon up the willpower. We're lucky, because then we have to be lucky, because since we don't have a free will, we're lucky that the universe, God, whoever is controlling everything, is allowing us to do this. As you're saying, we're enjoying that the universe has allowed us to do this. We're enjoying the process of losing weight. We're enjoying the process of feeling better. So this is very important for people to understand. Not having a free will does not mean that we can't enjoy our successes. And maintaining a healthy weight and losing weight is one of these successes.
Exactly. And yeah, there's so much positive to be gained from it, and that's why I think it's sad when people dismiss the free will topic as insignificant, because it matters greatly. And I think here's one of the things that's interesting is that now we know that determinism or indeterminism, either causality or acausality, both completely obliterate the idea of free will. But it seems to me that only determinism is of any practical use at helping us, because when we look at the causality, instead of just assuming that people are just randomly eating whatever they're eating, which to do that denies their food preferences. It denies their food preferences to start with, and the reasons that we all know exist.
Chandler, that's a brilliant point. I want to reiterate because it's such an important point. A lot of times people, when we hold this free will belief, let's say we're talking with someone who needs to lose weight and they're not able to lose this weight. We kind of say to ourselves, well, they should be losing it and they're not, and there's something wrong with them that they just they basically there's something, there's something that they're doing wrong, and it's about their free will. In other words, of their free will, they're just choosing not to lose this weight. And what happens with free will belief is that's where it ends. That's where it ends. Whereas as we overcome this free will belief, we understand, wait a minute, there are reasons why this person is not losing weight. There are reasons why this person is overeating. There are reasons why this person is eating, the wrong foods. And actually, Chandler, let's get into this because we're in a political season. I want to do a lot of shows on this. Basically, we're in the primaries now, but eventually we're going to have a Democratic candidate versus a Republican candidate for the presidency. And basically, let's talk about how it's the responsibility of our politicians to address this issue. Again, 2/3 of Americans are overweight. Not only does it lead to a lot of shaming and blaming and discrimination against the overweight, it leads to huge healthcare costs as people kind of are blamed of their free will being overweight, and then they go into denial. The blame is so hurtful, so harmful, they can't deal with it, so they can't properly address their weight problem. So Chandler, talk about like what our politicians should be saying and why it's their responsibility to take this on as an issue, also relative to this free will thing.
Well, it's interesting, George, because now obviously I know that the politicians, as would any public figure, would be terribly afraid at saying any public statements related to the topic of free will, because that's a sure way to get hate mail and to not get voted for. So that's our first problem. And second of all, we have to think, do these people even know about this or understand it? That is another tricky one. And of course, I'm no expert on how politics really works, but seriously, this needs to be this. I think, and this is my thought, just from and mostly from listening to Mitch and Mike, because they were talking politics. Is I seem to think that more the ones that are labeled as Democratic or liberal, for example, they tend to better understand in general that people don't choose certain things. They understand that people don't choose their sexuality. They understand that people don't choose to be poor, those sort of things. So they're already sort of on that side where they get, well, people don't really have, ultimate control over their lives in every area. So there's already a concession on that side that, yes, some people don't have control in certain areas of their lives. But what we're saying is really nobody has this ultimate originating control in any area of their lives. And this is why it's very important to understand that any policy, any political move by any government agency at all will have an effect on the population. I mean, anything that's done by the FDA, anything that's done by the AMA, whatever, these things related to food and health, for example, any statement they make, there's going to be people who read that, and that will cause some type of change in behavior for those who read that and understand it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Democrats are far more likely to get this and appreciate this, just like they're far more likely to understand that climate change is happening, to respect and appreciate and understand science than the Republicans. But what I have to say, because you were saying that, neither party has the courage, to a certain extent, to tell the people the truth about nobody has a free will and all. Partly because they're afraid to go up against religion to a certain extent. But one candidate, there's this debate in Iowa tonight, a Republican primary debate, and Fox News was actually, in my opinion, I listened to what they tweeted. I saw it online. They were being unfair to Trump. And Trump was a maverick. He basically said, well, if you're going to treat me like that, I'm not going to be in the debate, and your ratings are going to go down. And so now he's doing something, an event that's going to compete with this debate, this Fox News debate. And so, what I'm saying is, I disagree with a lot of Trump's policies, right? But the man shows courage, the kind of courage that Democrats and other Republicans should be showing so much. I mean, he values the integrity of what he's saying over what people want to hear to a great extent. And you need that in politics.
Yeah, I do think the people who do like Donald Trump, part of the reason they probably like him is because he'll come out and say what he thinks about some things. And so there's a certain level of a person being honest about what they really think. Even if you disagree with them about something, there's still something about, well, this person's real, instead of just, oh, I'm all afraid. I don't want to say anything because people will be offended, because that's just no way to live. And people, I don't think they do respect that.
Exactly. And I think sometimes, with this free will thing relative to the overweightness, I think it just needs someone to break the ice on this. For example, if you remember a couple of years ago, Colorado legalized cannabis, legalized marijuana, for recreational use. Then soon after that, Oregon did. Now Washington's legalized it. Alaska's legalized it. And now, politicians who wouldn't touch the subject before in previous years are now coming out for either like legal recreational marijuana or legal medical marijuana. So the reason I'm mentioning this is like the same dynamic could apply to this free will thing. To the extent that people understand that when people believe in free will, we're going to be meaner. We're going to be more cruel to other people. We're going to want to punish ourselves more. When we do something wrong, we say, oh my God, I did this my free will. I deserve to be punished. So this is major. This has major sociological implications that our leaders should be addressing. And again, all we need is for someone to break the ice, and then all of a sudden no one will be afraid to address this anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Because here's what I think happens is, how it always takes one person to start something with, whatever it is. There's always one person who's bold enough to do something that everyone else is afraid, but then they do it, and then someone else says, oh, well, this person did it, so maybe I can too. And then, once you have a case to follow the leader, one person started, and then you get more and more people who are like, oh, well, now all these other people have done this. So that's how shifts happen in society. In that sense, you could say one person can make a difference because of phenomenon like that.
Right. And again, going back to the politicians' responsibility, they are the leaders of this country, and this country is the leader of the world. So they need to summon up the courage, and they need to kind of actually get interested in this topic. They probably don't, even fully understand the harm this free will belief causes. It's not just about the weight thing, attributing the free will to people who are overweight and blaming them. This is across the board. Anytime we blame someone else for anything or blame ourselves, we're ordinarily doing it under the free will perspective that we had the free will, and since we didn't do what we should have been doing, we're evil, we're wrong, we deserve to be punished. I mean, this goes across the criminal justice system, goes across our economic system, goes across just so many sectors of our society. So again, as politicians, it's their job. It's their job to not be wimps about this. It's their job to not just simply not tell people things that are in their best interest, but perhaps they don't want to hear, like climate change. These politicians need to step up to the plate, and also the media. The reporters that interview them. Something major just happened this last week. Over the last 3 years or so, 4 years, 3 major science magazines, New Scientist, Scientific American Mind, and BBC Focus, came out with first ever cover stories refuting free will. Okay, that was huge. Now this week, the philosophy magazine, Philosophy Now, as their cover story, had as their story that free will is an illusion. So basically, this is getting out there, and so this may change the dynamics. This is, we're getting to a point. So now reporters who saw those articles in the science magazines, who see this article in Philosophy Now, they are armed with ammunition to then ask the candidates, do you believe in free will? Do you believe that it's right to blame someone for something that's not in their control at all?
Yeah, and here's an interesting thought, George. Now, in one of the podcasts where I was with Mitch and Jamie in that episode, I believe. Well, here's the deal. As I threw out the idea, well, let's suppose that being obese was a crime and you went to jail for that, or something like that. Well, imagine that. Now, some people who believe in free will, they might say, well, yeah, these people chose to be obese, so they deserve to be punished. So the free will believers would be for a policy where people are punished severely for being overweight. Whereas, an incompatibilist or determinist on the free will issue is going to be like, well, no, we should help these people. We should find out why the universe has compelled them to be obese and eat the way they do, and find a way to help them, if at all possible, but we don't punish people because we know nobody deserves to be punished.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we need a certain kind of like a threat of punishment to serve as a deterrent, because otherwise, like without, any threat of punishment, some people who wouldn't ordinarily commit crimes may. But, they've done research on this. They had two groups. One group was primed to believe that everyone has a free will. The other group was primed to believe that nobody has a free will. And then they were asked to weigh in on a question. Somebody committed a certain crime. How much time should they spend in prison or in jail, whatever? So it turned out that the people who believed in free will wanted that person to stay in jail twice as long as the people who didn't believe in it. And naturally, this was vindictive. This was revenge. It was a hate-based kind of like a vengeance based on and founded on the free will belief. Now, I wanted to get back to Trump because, he's made certain statements. I mean, the guy's worth, $10 billion. And he makes statements to the effect that, he's very religious. He believes in God. He understands that were it not for the grace of God, he wouldn't have made a dollar, in business. So he recognizes that he was lucky in that. So this is a perfect platform for saying, well, wait a minute, if you were lucky, for being so rich, how are you going to blame somebody who's so unlucky as to be poor?
Yes, excellent. Yeah, because I think what people do is they flip-flop. In one sense, they'll admit, well, this wasn't really up to me. I didn't build this all by myself for the grace of God or whatever you believe So, yeah, some people realize they were lucky, but then at the same time, they flip around and also take credit for things. And that's what's very complicated about it. But another thing people do is they want to take the credit for the good things that they consider good that they've done or the success they've had, but then they don't take the blame. And this is really an all or nothing thing, this free will thing, because you either have to claim that you have free will, and then you get both credit and blame, or you don't have free will and you get neither. And for some reason, that's hard for people to handle.
Chandler, you're right. And in politics, these politicians will flip-flop all the time. Even like Trump, 10 years ago, he was in favor of legalizing all drugs. Now he's not even so much in favor of legalizing marijuana. So a lot of these politicians, they don't have character. They basically just tell people what they want to hear. So again, with this free will thing though, for our sake, we're going to do an episode, for example, on how free will belief, basically amplifies climate change denial. It'll be a very interesting episode. But all right, so we've got about 30 seconds left. Why don't you just wrap things up with just summarizing this free will belief, overweight in this connection?
Yeah, the free will belief has many implications in how we treat people who are obese, as well as how we investigate and try to eliminate causes of unhealthy behavior that leads to obesity. And I think that determinism is a much better way than this archaic belief in free will.
Excellent. That's all we have time for today. Stay tuned for other episodes where we try to explain why we don't have a free will and why this matters. Thanks for watching.
I hope you enjoyed listening to our fun conversation about food, obesity, politics, and free will, and understand why free will is an illusion and why it matters. And if you don't get it, we're going to keep repeating it until you do. So thank you for listening and goodbye.